Could you imagine that the most luxurious rooms in Victorian mansions were designed not for comfort, but to suppress women's will? In an era when outward glamour was valued above human happiness, the walls of wealthy homes heard more unshed tears than sincere laughter. We are accustomed to admiring exquisite interiors and the rustle of silk dresses, forgetting the price paid by their owners. Behind the closed doors of living rooms and bedrooms, quiet tragedies unfolded that were not to be spoken of aloud, even to those closest to them. Women of that era were expected to be perfect statues, adorning their husbands' lives but deprived of the right to their own desires and voices. The entire way of life in the Age of Splendor was designed to turn a living soul into an obedient shadow, knowing its place in the hierarchy. This is not a story about balls and receptions, but about endless loneliness amid velvet and gilding. Watch the video to the end, and you will learn how architecture and etiquette combine to create the most beautiful and cruel prison in history for millions of women. What if I told you that everything you believed about the romance of that period was just a beautiful lie? A society ladies' mourning did not begin with peaceful rest, but with hard and monotonous work in the so-called mourning room. This room, often small and modestly furnished, became the first line of defense in the battle for the family's social status. The woman would sit down at her writing desk to write dozens of letters, each of which was subject to the strictest rules of etiquette and propriety. Not a single mistake or incorrect wording could be allowed, lest it cast a shadow on her husband's reputation. Every word was weighed on the scales of public opinion, turning lively communication into a dry and formal ritual. Personal feelings, anxieties, or complaints were strictly forbidden here, because the letter could fall into the wrong hands. The paper tolerated everything except sincerity, and the ink recorded only routine phrases about the weather and upcoming visits. At the table in the morning room, the woman felt like a secretary of her own life, which she did not actually control. Even her handwriting had to be of a certain style, rounded, neat, and devoid of masculine sharpness or individuality. Any deviation from the norm was perceived as a sign of bad taste or an unbalanced character. The woman literally erased her personality, writing perfectly even lines on expensive thick paper with the family monogram. She wrote about balls where she was bored and about people she despised, maintaining a mask of complacency. The silence of the morning room was broken only by the scratching of the pen and the ticking of the table clock, measuring the time of her confinement. The windows often overlooked the garden, but there was no time to admire nature. The stack of unanswered letters always seemed endless. It was a time when social obligations replaced real life, substituting polite phrases for genuine emotions. The woman knew that one wrong phrase could cost her family an invitation to high society. Sometimes, in rare moments of solitude, she could allow herself to freeze and just stare at a blank sheet of paper, dreaming of writing what was really on her mind. But her inner censor, trained by years of discipline, immediately pulled her back to reality. Dreams remained dreams, and the next empty words of gratitude for yesterday's dinner were put on paper. This routine was more exhausting than physical labor because it required constant hypocrisy and suppression of her own self. By noon, the woman felt drained, even though the day was just beginning and new challenges lay ahead. The morning office was a symbol of how the bureaucracy of social life destroyed the living soul. And this was only the beginning of a day full of restrictions and prohibitions created by men for women. I'm very interested to hear your point of view. What do you think about a life where even a personal letter does not belong to you? Write about it in the comments. Are you ready to learn the truth about why Victorian dinners were torture for women rather than a pleasure? The luxurious dining room with heavy curtains and massive mahogany furniture was the main stage for family well-being. It was here, under the light of a huge crystal chandelier, that the daily performance of the perfect family was staged. However, for the lady of the house, this performance was full of tension and fear of making a wrong move. She sat at the head of the table, straight as a string, encased in a stiff corset that prevented her from breathing deeply. The food was just a backdrop, because the woman was required to eat like a bird, demonstrating a lack of carnal appetite. Any display of hunger or enjoyment of food was considered vulgar and unworthy of a true lady. While the men enjoyed roasted meat and thick sauces, she barely touched her plate, pretending to be satisfied with spiritual nourishment. Her husband's gaze from the other end of the long table was the main indicator of her success or failure that evening. One disapproving nod could mean that after dinner, she would face a cold rebuke behind closed doors. The dining room turned into a minefield where every careless word could lead to an explosion of domestic tranquility. The servants, scurrying silently behind her, were invisible witnesses to this tension, adding to the stiffness. She couldn't relax for a second, drop her shoulders, or simply lean back in her chair. Her posture had to remain impeccable, even if the corset dug into her ribs, causing sharp physical pain. The atmosphere at the table was often so thick and oppressive that the clink of silver forks on porcelain seemed deafening. Women learned the art of the social face, a mask that expressed nothing but mild interest. Behind this mask lay boredom, fatigue, and a desperate desire for this endless dinner to finally end. Even seating the guests was a complex puzzle, a mistake in which could cost the hostess her reputation in society. She had to remember all the subtleties of hierarchy, old grudges, and new alliances among her guests. All evening, she made sure the glasses were full and the conversation flowed smoothly, while remaining in the shadows herself. When dessert was finally served, it was a signal of imminent release, but it was still too early to relax. She had to gracefully rise from the table and lead the ladies to the living room, leaving the men to enjoy cigars and serious conversations. Leaving the dining room was no less important a ritual than the dinner itself, requiring dignity and smooth movements. I wonder how this topic is perceived in different parts of the world. Where are you from? Do you agree with the arguments presented? In the next chapter, you will learn the truth about a room that was supposed to be a refuge, but became a place of diagnosis. Want to know a secret that will change your life and your perception of female fragility in the past? The boudoir in a Victorian home was considered strictly female territory, a holy of holies where men were forbidden to enter without special permission. It would seem that here a woman could finally take off her mask and be herself, but the reality was much more cruel. It was here that the cult of female weakness flourished, elevated by society to the rank of virtue and the standard of beauty. Pallor, frequent fainting spells, and constant fatigue were considered signs of a delicate mental constitution and high birth. Doctors of the time readily diagnosed any woman who showed character with hysteria or nervous exhaustion. The treatment was always rest, isolation, and refusal of any intellectual activity, including reading serious books. The boudoir became a soft, silk-upholstered chamber where the patient was slowly deprived of her will to live. This is also where the painful procedures of dressing took place, which in itself was an instrument of torture. Maids tightened the corset lacing so tightly that the ribs were deformed and the internal organs shifted. This was done not only for the sake of fashion, but also so that a woman would be physically unable to take a deep breath or make a sudden movement. Limited movement led to limited thinking, narrowing a woman's world to the size of her room. She learned to be helpless because it was helplessness that guaranteed her the protection and patronage of men. Any attempt to show independence was perceived as a symptom of illness, requiring immediate medical intervention. The walls of the boudoir heard most of the women's sobs, which had to be hidden from servants and household members. Here one could give free rein to tears, but only quietly so as not to swell the eyes and spoil the complexion. Even in suffering, a woman had to remain aesthetically attractive and touching. The furnishings, bottles of smelling salts, soft pillows, elegant trinkets, created the illusion of comfort and care. But in essence, these were attributes of a golden cage, designed to brighten up confinement and distract from thoughts of freedom. Women were convinced that they were too fragile for the harsh outside world, and they began to believe it. Instead of developing her talents, she spent her energy maintaining the image of a sickly angel. This image required constant effort and acting skills, depleting her already meager resources. The boudoir was a place where a healthy woman slowly turned into a shadow of herself, submitting to an imposed ideal. Thank you for watching. Where are you watching us from? What interested you most in the description of this room? Don't forget to like if you find this topic interesting. What if I showed you a time machine that would take us to the center of the most important theatrical production of the Victorian era? The living room was the heart of the home, its front facade, where all the wealth and status of the family was displayed. Here, every vase, every painting, and every piece of furniture had its own strictly defined place and meaning. But the main exhibit in this luxurious showcase was always the mistress of the house, impeccable and silent. She sat in her strictly designated chair, receiving guests at specially designated hours and days known to the whole world. In this room, women judged each other with ruthless scrutiny, noticing the slightest flaws. A speck on a glove or a slightly stray strand of hair could become the subject of gossip for weeks to come. The hostess always felt dozens of attentive eyes on her, looking for any reason to criticize. The men in the living room felt like they were in charge, occupying the best seats and conducting loud conversations. The women, on the other hand, were merely a beautiful backdrop, a frame for male success and power. They were allowed to play music or sing, but only to entertain the guests, not for self-expression. The atmosphere was saturated with the smell of wax, perfume, and old dust that had accumulated in the heavy velvet curtains. The air was often stuffy, as airing the room was considered harmful to expensive furniture and wallpaper. It was difficult to breathe in this stuffiness, but it was necessary to maintain a fresh appearance and a friendly smile. Leaving the living room after the reception, the woman felt deadly tired from the need to constantly keep up appearances. She turned off her smile like a lamp and returned to the gray reality of her existence. The living room remained empty and cold, waiting for the next performance, where the main character would again play her role without words. Do you agree with this? Please tell us what you think about it. Every opinion is valuable. In the next chapter, you will learn how even sleep turned into a test of coldness. Contrary to modern ideas, the Victorian bedroom was rarely a place of romance and intimacy. It was a space where the coldness of the relationship between spouses found physical embodiment. Often, husbands and wives had adjoining but separate bedrooms, meeting only when necessary or according to schedule. The luxurious four-poster bed resembled a monument rather than a place to rest. The room was always kept cool, as heat was considered harmful to health and morals. Heavy blankets weighed down on the bed, but did not provide the emotional warmth that women so desperately needed. Nights were often spent in complete silence, interrupted only by the sounds of the street or the snoring of a spouse. After fulfilling his duty, her husband would often go to his room, leaving his wife alone in a huge cold bed. This loneliness after intimacy was perhaps the most acute and painful experience. The woman was left alone with her thoughts, realizing that her body did not belong to her. The walls of the bedroom saw the true face of marriage in that era, a union of capital and titles, not loving people. Here, masks were removed, but instead of intimacy, a wall of alienation and indifference arose. The woman understood that her main function was to give birth to an heir, not to be loved and desired. The bedroom often had a dressing table with a mirror in which the woman saw her beauty fading. Each new wrinkle caused panic because her appearance was her only capital. The fear of losing her attractiveness and becoming unnecessary to her husband haunted her constantly. This is also where boxes of jewelry were kept, cold stones that replaced the warmth of human relationships. Necklaces and bracelets were shackles that tied her to this house and this man. When she put them on, she felt the weight of her situation, masked by the sparkle of diamonds. The bedroom was the final stop of each day, a place where she took stock of her life. And often these results were disappointing, full of regrets about unfulfilled hopes. Behind the closed doors of the bedroom, dreams of love died, giving way to habit and resignation. It was the most honest place in the house where the emptiness of relationships became tangible and visible. Guess what happened next when a young girl crossed the threshold of the ballroom for the first time? To the uninitiated observer, the ball seemed like a fairy tale of music, lights, and whirling couples in magnificent costumes. But in reality, it was a stock exchange, a harsh market where young girls were the commodity. The ballroom was a place where destinies were decided, deals were made, and hopes were dashed, all disguised as a celebration. Debutantes in white dresses lined up along the walls, waiting to be chosen by potential buyers. Suitors. They were evaluated like thoroughbred horses. Their teeth, posture, pedigree, and dowry size were examined. The slightest mistake in a dance or an awkward word could reduce a girl's market value significantly. Mothers sat around the perimeter, watching every glance and gesture directed at their daughters. They were the managers of this process, ruthlessly weeding out unsuitable candidates. For them, the ball was not entertainment, but hard work to secure the future of their families. The girls themselves were in a state of terrifying tension, hidden behind polite smiles and fans. They knew that one unsuccessful season could leave them spinsters forever. The fear of remaining unclaimed was the main driving force behind this brilliant mechanism. The men glided across the dance floor with the air of connoisseurs, choosing the future mother of their heirs and the decoration of their living room. They were allowed to do anything: choose, reject, flirt, and change their minds. The girls could only wait obediently for an invitation and hope for a good match. The music drowned out the whispers of gossip that snaked through the hall, discussing every outfit and every couple. A reputation could be destroyed by a single caustic remark from an influential socialite. The air was electrified with rivalry, envy, and hidden hostility, masked by politeness. As the candles burned down and the music faded, the hall emptied, leaving behind the scent of wilted flowers and disappointment. Carriages carried away the weary debutantes, whose fates had been sealed in the whirl of the waltz. The ballroom was the most beautiful and cruelest place where youth was sold. I'm very interested to hear your point of view. What do you think about how modern marriage traditions differ from this market? Write about it in the comments. In the next chapter, you will learn why even the kitchen was a place of strict hierarchy. Although noble ladies rarely descended to the kitchen, this room was the foundation on which the entire house rested. It was a world hidden from the eyes of guests, full of steam, heat, smells, and endless hard work. Here in the basement worked those who provided a luxurious life upstairs, remaining invisible shadows. The kitchen lived by its own rules and schedule, which began long before dawn. Huge cast-iron stoves required constant attention, coal, and physical strength to keep the fire going. The women who worked here had faces reddened by the heat in rough hands, which contrasted sharply with the paleness of the mistresses. The mistress of the house came down here only to give instructions on the menu and check the accounts. It was a moment of collision between two worlds, the pampered aristocracy and the harsh reality of survival. She felt like a stranger here, trying to leave this stuffy and noisy place as quickly as possible. For the servants, the kitchen was the center of life, a place where they ate, gossiped, and sometimes rested. There was a strict hierarchy here. From the cook to the dishwasher, everyone knew their place. Relationships here were simpler and rougher, but often more honest than the fake smiles upstairs. The food that was brought upstairs on exquisite porcelain was prepared in huge copper pots and on heavy baking trays. The cooking process was complex and laborious, without modern blenders and mixers. Everything was done by hand, beating, chopping, grinding, which required enormous physical effort. The smells of the kitchen permeated the servants' clothes, forever separating them from the world of their lavender-scented masters. Ventilation was poor, and by evening the air became heavy and humid. It was a place where comfort was created, but where comfort itself was nowhere to be found. The kitchen walls absorbed soot and grease, despite constant cleaning and scraping the floors with sand. It was the dark underside of the shiny mansion, its dirty but necessary interior. Without this hellish labor below, there would be no paradise above. The division between upstairs and downstairs was not just architectural, it was mental and social. The women upstairs suffered from idleness, the women downstairs from exhausting work. Both were hostages to the same system, but on different sides of the barricades. The kitchen was a reminder that behind every luxury, there is always someone's hard, invisible work. The library in a Victorian house was traditionally considered a men's club, the master's territory, where women were not exactly forbidden to enter, but were unwelcome. It was a room steeped in the smell of tobacco, old leather, and, most importantly, serious knowledge. The floor-to-ceiling bookcases held the wisdom of centuries, which was considered superfluous and even harmful to the female mind. Women were allowed to enter to pick up a light novel or a volume of poetry, but nothing more. Serious works on philosophy, politics, or science were considered unsuitable for their delicate psyches. There was a belief that excessive reading could damage women's health and ability to bear children. Here, the husband received business partners, discussed investments, and decided the fate of the family capital. The wife had no say in these matters, even though they directly affected her future. She remained ignorant of the family's financial situation until disaster struck. The atmosphere of the library was austere, dark, and oppressive, designed for concentration and male conversation. Massive furniture, globes, maps, everything spoke of a big world accessible only to men. A woman felt like an intruder here, trespassing on foreign territory. The fate of children was often decided in the library, which schools the sons would attend and whom the daughters would marry. The father of the family was listened to unquestioningly, like a supreme judge. The mother's opinion could be heard, but the final word always remained with the head of the household. The silence of the library was different from the silence of the boudoir. Here it was not empty, but significant, weighty. It was the silence of power, money, and decisions that affected the lives of many people. Here, women were merely supplicants, dependent on the will of the master of the office. It was often in the library that bankruptcy, or conversely, an unexpected inheritance was announced. It was the flight control center where first-class passengers were not allowed. The woman lived in the house but did not run it, remaining an eternal child under guardianship. The bookshelves were a wall separating the male world of reason from the female world of feelings. Overcoming this wall was more difficult than physical obstacles. The library was a symbol of intellectual segregation, depriving women of the right to think. But it was here, among the books, that some women found the keys to understanding their lack of freedom. The nursery was often located on the upper floor of the house, away from the formal halls and parents' bedrooms. It would seem that this should be a place of love and care, but in wealthy homes it was a zone of alienation. Children were raised by hired nannies and governesses, and parents were only visitors in the lives of their own offspring. The mother would go up to the nursery at strictly defined times to spend a little time with her children. She was dressed in an expensive dress that could not be creased or stained, which ruled out active games. Hugs were restrained, conversations were edifying and formal. The children grew up seeing their mother as a beautiful but distant fairy who smelled of perfume rather than warm milk. The nanny was closer and more familiar to them because she was the one who comforted them at night and treated their scraped knees. This created a tragic rift between mother and child that often could not be overcome throughout their lives. The toys were expensive and beautiful, but often they could not be played with as one wished. Dollhouses were exact copies of real mansions, accustoming girls to their future role as housewives. Boys were surrounded by toy soldiers and horses, preparing them for military service or estate management. Motherhood became a function, a duty to present well-bred heirs to society. A woman could not simply hold her child to her breast when she was sad or fool around with him. Etiquette penetrated even the most intimate spheres of relationships, freezing them. The nursery was a world where the mother was a guest, not the hostess, and this caused her hidden pain. She saw how the children gravitated toward the nanny and felt jealousy that she could not show. Her role was reduced to checking on their academic progress and choosing their clothes. The silence in the nursery when the children were asleep was especially piercing for the mother standing by the crib. She looked at her children as if through glass, unable to truly touch their lives. This was the price of status and wealth, the loss of the most natural connection in the world. The nursery was the first lesson in loneliness that the future inhabitants of these luxurious homes learned. Death in the Victorian era was as public and regulated an event as marriage. When someone died in the house, it was plunged into mourning that could last for years, especially for women. Rooms were draped in black fabric, mirrors were covered, clocks were stopped. The house was turned into a living tomb. The widow became the central figure in this somber ritual, obliged to wear black crepe and a veil. Her grief was on display, but it had to be restrained and dignified. She lost her right to social life, entertainment, and bright colors for many months. Mourning was a complex system of rules. How wide the border on the headscarf should be, what jewelry was acceptable. Violating these rules was tantamount to insulting the memory of the deceased and was met with condemnation. Women found themselves locked in their grief and within four walls, cut off from the world. Paradoxically, it was widowhood that often brought women long-awaited freedom and financial independence. If her husband left her a fortune, she became the mistress of her own destiny for the first time in her life. She could manage her money, travel, and make decisions without looking back at her spouse. However, this transition was painful and long, passing through a period of social death. A woman had to prove to society that she was inconsolable before she could start living for herself. The hypocrisy of mourning required her to portray universal grief, even if the marriage was unhappy. Mourning jewelry made of jet or even the hair of the deceased was popular and eerie at the same time. It symbolized an eternal connection with the departed, not allowing the loss to be forgotten for a moment. It was a cult of death that the Victorians elevated to an absolute. Over time, mourning softened, turning into semi-mourning, with gray and purple tones appearing. It was like a slow return to life after a long winter. Women emerged from the shadows, often stronger and more independent than they had been in marriage. The story of Victorian women often ended here, in black silk, with an inheritance and the right to finally speak with their own voice. We walked through a series of luxurious rooms, each of which was a stage in the life of a woman of that era. From mourning correspondence to widow's attire, her entire life was planned down to the minute and centimeter. A golden cage remained a cage, even if the bars were entwined with roses and decorated with diamonds. These women left us not only beautiful portraits, but also an example of incredible inner strength and patience. Their silence, which they were taught from childhood, today speaks louder than any words, reminding us of the value of the freedom to be ourselves. Which of these rooms did you find the most suffocating and frightening in its hopelessness? Write your opinion in the comments, because now we have the right to speak that they were denied. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new stories about the secrets of the past.